Hi, welcome to my blog. My name is Tom Shue, and today we're going to do a tutorial. And in this tutorial, we're going to work with some images, and we're going to export it out of Lightroom. We're going to bring it into Photoshop, and we're going to work with some clipping masks, and we're going to resize it and bring it back into Lightroom without any extra keystrokes. So, in order to work with a file inside of Photoshop, you can do it a couple ways. The simplest way is through a shortcut, which is Control E. Control on Windows, Command on a Mac, hit Control E, and then that will export the image into Photoshop. Okay, so now we're in Photoshop, and we'll look at the image size first. So if we look at the image size, you'll see that it's a 300 dpi image. Well, if we want something more friendly for the web, instead of having to export and save it back in into Lightroom, we can just simply resize it to say 72 dpi, which is perfect size for web work. Monitors don't resolve over 72. It's still a huge file. At 66%, it's dwarfing the workspace. So let's go ahead and zoom that back out so we can work with it. And if you want to fit the screen exactly, if you hold down the Z key and you left click or right click on the mouse, you can slide left to right and fit it exactly the way you want it. Okay, so we'll zoom out a little bit more. Okay, so now we're positioned on the workspace. So what I want to do is I want to say use this image to create maybe a layout for a banner ad or something like this. This is a great job for clipping masks, and clipping masks haven't changed at all in any version of Photoshop except in CS6. They added a couple unique features that allow it to work with groups of objects. So let's grab a rectangle tool here, and let's create a rectangle. Okay, so say if we wanted this to be our rectangle, and we can change that later on if we don't like that size. And let's add some text. Let's just type the word flowers. Okay, now if we want to resize this text, there's a few ways you can do it. First way is when you have the text tool open, when you're actually typing in the text, you can use this bar across here, which is the text toolbar, and we could change the size of the font, and we can change the font, and we can make it bold or italic or however we like. One of the tricks you can use, instead of having to type in, say, a number here, say if we typed in 100, you can actually left click and drag a number, so it's kind of like a preview. Another way to work with them is if, say, you've already selected the move tool, and the shortcut to get to the move tool is the V key as in Victor, is you can use the character palette. Here's your character palette. Okay, so that's one way you can work within it. So let's pull that back up again, Windows and character, and we can do the same thing here. With our text layer selected, we can increase or decrease the size of the font. We can change the offset. We can stretch it up or down. We can squish it together or spread it apart. Let's get it back to the default here. Okay. So the last way you can work with the font is through the transform tool. So it's Control on a Windows, Command on a Mac, T as in transform, and if you hold down the shift key and you drag in the corner, it will constrain it. It'll stay the same proportions, it'll just get smaller. So say if I want it to be long and skinny, I can just grab one side and I can squish it down or raise it up however I want. Okay, so now that we have this, let's just make this a little bit smaller and recenter it. Now we're just eyeballing this in for a tutorial. And let's maybe put in another small box at the bottom. Maybe we want to put in some circles for some buttons or something like this. Maybe we're building a website. So let's grab the ellipse tool and create some buttons. There's one. Let's just delete that last one here. And we'll just duplicate this ellipse. If you hit Control on Windows or Command on Mac, J, we've got 3 copies of the button now. and if we hold the shift key, it will slide it over directly in line with the previous button. Okay, so now we've got these buttons. Alright, now we're going to turn all this text and shapes into the flowers pushing through these objects, so it just reveals the flowers. Okay, that's called using a clipping mask. So what we'll do is we'll duplicate our background layer, so if we make any mistakes, we have a safety net. So it's Control on Windows, Command on Mac, J. So we've got our copy, and we'll bring this all the way to the top. Okay, and just for the tutorial, I want to show you this. So I'm going to bring this rectangle tool right underneath. So in previous versions of Photoshop, this is the workflow of what you would have to do. You select the background copy, which we'll just call it the flowers. Okay, and if you right click, you'll say create clipping mask. Okay, so it didn't pull all of our objects through. The question is why? And I'll show you why. Because we need to group everything together. Let's Control Z. If we select this first object on the top and we select this last object on the bottom, you can do a merge visible and put it through, but it doesn't give you any independent control of manipulating each one of these items if we wanted to. The best way to do it is to come right here to this window and say Group from Layers. It's off the screen, but it's there. So we've grouped from layers, and now we drop down, we have each one of these objects inside of that folder under Groups. So now if we apply that clipping mask, let's close this one off so we don't see it. So now if we select our image and we apply that clipping mask, all of the objects press through. So now we can do some interesting things with this as a group instead of having to do it individually. Say if we wanted to put a drop shadow on each one, or we wanted to make a change on just one of the items, we could do that independently. So let's just apply a drop shadow. So you click this blending options, which is FX, and we're going to bring it up so we can just see it on the screen. And we'll just select drop shadow. So you highlight the drop shadow, and we're going to make the size of it a little bit bigger. Okay, and the distance, let's get the opacity all the way up. Bring the size down just there so we can see it. So there it is, hard, and then as you increase the size, it kind of feathers it. Okay, and we can bring it closer. So we'll bring our size down again. I like to work with it hard and soften it up. So instead of going in with this angle tool, you can just go right into the interface and drag it exactly where you want it to be. So I want it to be here, and now I'll increase the size until it softens up. Okay, we'll click OK. So there's our drop shadow. I also want to create a white layer. These checkerboards indicates we are on transparency. So we'll create a new layer. Okay, and in this layer we'll use the paint bucket tool here. We'll make sure that our white color chip is selected. If it wasn't, we can hit the X key, and that will flip-flop the color chips. So with white selected, we'll just dump paint in on this layer, and we have to drop it underneath. Let's Control Z that and find out where we put it. We need to drop it underneath of, it was inside the group, we need to drop it underneath of that group layer. Okay, so there's a quick way to make some unique text for, say, a website or banners or anything like this that you'd like to create. And if you're not happy with something, say for example the drop shadow, we just double click it and we can change the opacity on this drop shadow, or we could resize the dots if we like. You come over here and grab the ellipse and hit Control T, and we can change one of them or change all three by selecting all three and hold shift, and we can make the dots bigger if we like. So it leaves you the ability to manipulate working in those grouped folders. items individually or as a group and apply things. I want to thank you for visiting my blog today. Again, my name's Tom Shue. Until next time, we'll see you soon.